Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today you're going to hear the story of Walker Montgomery, a newly 16-year-old boy from Missouri who took his own life after a sextortion encounter on Instagram. Walker's dad, Brian, is going to introduce us to his son and take us through what happened to Walker. A disclaimer here, this episode discusses suicide, but it also talks about the realities of what our kids are experiencing online. Sextortion is exploding in the US and Canada and Australia and the UK. Parents need to be aware of this threat and learn how to protect our children from it. I want to thank this week's episode sponsor, Bark Technologies. I am so grateful that these days we parents have a safer device option for our kids. The Bark phone was built for families who are looking to protect their children online. It has parental controls built in. It allows us to manage their entire digital experience safely and protect them from threats like sextortion. Let's jump into my conversation with Walker's dad, Brian Montgomery. So, hey, Brian, thank you so much for being here and having the strength to tell Walker's story to the listeners here at Scrolling to Death. Parents are desperate to learn about the harms of social media so we can protect our children from them. So before we get into all of this educating, I want to get to know Walker. So can you tell us about your son?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start by just kind of describing the culture of our family. We live in the country. I grew up in the country, and we're in the ag business. We're in ag business. We farm. We're in the outdoors all the time, whether it's working on land or hunting or fishing or a variety of those things. And so that's been the kind of the culture of our family. That in athletics and in church and faith. Really, Walker, he was always there, right there by my side, out there doing the things that we love to do. We're hard workers. We love to be outside working and taking care of the land and taking care of chores and doing the things we do. And so, I mean, Walker, I guess to really, if you talked about a character trait of Walker, it was work ethic. He loved to work. He loved to please. He would be the first to pitch in and help and do things and never complained. He just loved it. He just loved tractors. He loved the outdoors. He loved that whole culture. Later in life, he really started to develop this passion for football. He loved it. I mean, it was once he started kind of coming into his own, and he really just was engulfed by that, by football and the teammates and the whole deal, and it fit him because, I'm not very athletic, but Walker wasn't extremely athletic either, but he had a work ethic that made up for that. He would outwork you. That's how he would excel. From a, social life, we obviously the same, we live in the country and live on a farm. So our kids go to a private school in Starkville. So we were 25 minutes from town. So we didn't live in a neighborhood type environment, and so when it was home, we were on the farm working on stuff and doing stuff. And when, whether we were in town and, like I said, participating in athletics and that kind of thing. Walker, socially, I mean, everybody loved Walker, all his teammates, all his friends. I mean, he had in his grade, you don't find this very often. And we see that just looking through our history with our kids, different kids, and some classes come through and they're really solid. And some, when I say classes, I mean, their peers.
Yeah.
It's just different. Every class is different, but his class was really unique in that they were always very tight, very close, I mean, it was not the bullying. It wasn't the, the wishing, kind of pushing one another down. It was always trying to lift one another up.
Cool.
And it was his friend group. And so it's very contradictory to what happened to Walker, and I will get into that. I know it a little bit later, but, I think people think of this and even inferred in the title of your organization, what kids are doing today, what we think of as spending these tremendous amounts of time in social media and tech. That wasn't Walker at all. I mean, I think he had an Instagram account, but he had less than 20 posts ever. He liked to look at football stuff. He liked to look at hunting stuff. So he was on it, but he wasn't. It wasn't an habitual user, of that.
Right.
And so, that would be a real high level description of who Walker was. I mean, just loved by everybody and soft and when he needed to be, but he was hard when he needed to be. And just, man, he was awesome. He was a good kid.
Yeah. And I think a lot of parents I talk to have the best intentions and their kids don't know, they're not there to try to seek out, inappropriate content or harmful content, and they're not actually
Right.
spending a lot of time on it either. But the harmful content sort of gets fed, and the kids get targeted with things that
Yeah.
can harm them. So, what happened to Walker in the early morning of December 1st of 2022?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of give the context of that afternoon, I mean, it was very normal. I mean, we came home and
Yeah.
ate supper together. My oldest daughter was off to college, but it was, my wife and I and the other three kids, Walker and his brother Bennett and Sarah, his younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we had supper, very typical afternoon, talking about Bennett and I, his younger brother had actually gone hunting that afternoon. Walker had football and had worked out, and he'd just gotten his driver's license. A month earlier, his birthday was November the 1st. And the time after, when we figured out, obviously the next day we knew something catastrophic had happened, but none of it made sense because we were like, things were so normal. I mean, my wife put Walker to bed, put the other kids to bed, prayed with them, and it was, like I said, it just seemed like a very normal night. And I think it was. It goes back to that concept I really talk about it a lot as a trap. I mean, to your point, the parents you speak to, their kids aren't seeking out necessarily, inappropriate things. It's a place where those things are there, and if you're the unfortunate one to bump into those traps, which is what I feel like happened to Walker.
Right.
So he had actually been texting back and forth on Instagram through the messenger with some of his buddies, and they were exchanging Bible verses up until 10:30 that night, just talking about, and around midnight, Walker received a message from what he thought was a young girl his age, teenage girl, and struck up this conversation. It was very, just a very surface teenage type conversation. Hey, what's going on? I mean, the person referenced that, hey, I'm friends with, these people who are friends with Walker. So just building credibility, setting that trap, so to speak. That went on for, several minutes to where it was just a casual conversation, but not very long. That led to the invitation for Walker to participate in a sexual act through what we think of as the FaceTime portal there and Instagram Messenger.
Right.
And Walker agreed. And so, that led to this sexual encounter between this person and Walker. And, Walker thinks he's looking at a teenage girl his age. That was all manufactured. That wasn't real. It wasn't a girl. It was a Nigerian,
Was it an AI program that was being used, or what was he looking at?
No, to kind of put that, what we believe that most of these cases are driven by is stolen content or extorted content.
Okay.
So they're able to, between software and they've got the content of the person that they've stolen. We understand that happens through some of these dating apps. We understand that, there's a variety of ways, even from porn sites. Yeah. They steal this and they build a profile around it is what they do.
Right.
And like I said, that can be, because that's kind of their MO with females generally, is that they want the content, and they figured out that they can use the content to extort boys. Boys are much more willing to fall for the trap, and they're just as likely to pay money, probably more likely to pay money. Yeah. So that's kind of the scam. So, Walker thinks he's looking at this person, this teenage girl. In fact, he's not. But at the same time, it looks safe because it just felt, I'm assuming that, if like you hit record, it tells me that you're recording this conversation, right? I can see that on the screen there.
Yeah.
And that's the same way, what I would expect most kids believe, that if they were recording this, I would be able to tell.
Wow.
But what was actually happening is they had a secondary device that was recording the screen of Walker. And so, to be as sensitive as we can to the audience, Walker was participating in a sexual act, and that was on video. So, that really gets portrayed a lot when we talk about sextortion. Well, don't send pictures or don't send video. And a lot of those things that we talk about a picture, or we talk about, some glimpse of a video or something like that. That really wasn't this was a graphic sexual act. Walker was caught in, and it was on video, and it had been, in his mind, I'm sure it was inescapable, with that media being there. Anyway, once that was over, they immediately come back to Walker and said, hey, you're going to pay us $1,000 or we're going to share this with everybody that you know. Of course, this conversation goes on for a couple of hours. So, they kind of started around midnight. And I think the last communication was around 2:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And, Walker is in those conversations. He's defending as much as he can. This is wrong. This is against the law. You can't do this. It's a back and forth. And I guess I'm assuming, what was happening on the other end of that is the perpetrators were the guy was trying to apply more pressure. So he started sending Walker screenshots out of his Instagram Messenger where it looked like he was sending the videos out to people in Walker's friend list. So he had done the research on who Walker's most, highest. You can look at the posts that have been made and see who responds to Walker's posts. Well, that's most likely the people that are most important to Walker, right? And so they had documented who those people were on Instagram, and they were showing these screenshots where they were sending the videos out. The fact was they weren't sending them out. They didn't send anything out. It was a bluff. But
they
Walker
edited it to make it look like they had sent it.
Yeah, they just showed a screenshot with it being in the outbox. They didn't actually send the videos.
Wow.
Of course, that took the stress to a whole different level. And Walker at that point, he's still communicating in a defensive way. And finally, they get to Walker's mom as one of those recipients. And Walker's comment back then was, "I'm just gonna kill myself." And and I always try to make the audience aware of what kind of depravity we're talking about with these people, because at the point of somebody's going to commit suicide, that doesn't help their cause of getting paid.
Right.
That's their primary goal traditionally, and primarily is to get paid what they're asking for. Their response was, "Go ahead, because you're already dead anyway." I mean, they're applying this pressure to Walker. Just, your life's over. Everything you own, everything you are is going to be over with. Everybody in your school is going to know this, going to see this. But then once he responds that way, their response there was, "Go ahead, because you're already dead anyway." And you got to think what it takes to really, how removed you are from the value of human life to have that response, right?
Right. Because that has nothing to do with them getting the money, which is the whole goal. So why are they then going? Because I've heard this a lot. They encourage the suicide.
Yeah, I think you're dealing with people whose lives are probably they don't have the quality of life we get to enjoy in the United States, many of them, and there's a lot of hatred towards that. There's a lot of factors that can contribute to that, right? I mean, but regardless, it's that removal of the appreciation for the value of human life, and so at some point in there, the conversation ended. They stopped responding to Walker, and Walker went into my office, which was across the house, but he went into my office where I have a safe. And of course, we were in and out of there. I mean, Walker would have been the last kid on the planet you would ever dream, or any of our kids would have ever dreamed about. Never had a reason, to even consider suicide. I mean, Walker had zero mental issues, the things that would, the prerequisites you would normally think of, that would lead to suicide. He had none of that. And of course, we didn't know, once we found out that he had committed suicide, we knew something had gone really wrong. But anyway, Walker went into my safe and got a handgun. And at some point between then and when we found him, we figured 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning, he took his own life.
I'm so sorry, Brian.
So yeah, it's surreal still. It's like this is a redefinition of our lives, and it's taken us on a mission, to try to make a difference, and so that other families don't have to endure what we're enduring. That's what happened.
And thank you for your strength in telling that story, and it is helping to expose other families to this issue and save other children's lives. So please know that. I know you've heard that before, but please know that. How did you find out what happened? So I'm assuming Walker had an iPhone?
He did. Yeah, he had an iPhone, which, to further that of, transparency. I mean, we had the password to Walker's iPhone. We've required it of all our kids, and we really haven't ever checked behind them much. Every once in a while, we'll just make sure that nothing's changed. And we've done that for all of our kids, but that had electronics. But Walker's password we knew, and so when we found him, of course, the next morning we were, the best way I can describe that day is chaos. But I felt strongly that the answers to our questions would be on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we gave that to the local sheriff's department. We're the first to respond.
Okay.
And they did a good job of dumping the phone and trying to find, they found like the local sheriff's department, after 2 or 3, it took maybe a month actually, before they said, look, we think this may be something, but we're not really sure. They gave some kind of indication that they think there was a conversation with somebody that led Walker to this. And our local police department in Starkville actually had a case of this in recent history. Mm-hmm. And so they thought that they may have been connected. And so they requested that the FBI engage, and they did. And once the FBI engaged in the process, they put all the pieces together and were able to extract all the conversation from the phone. And they met us in our home. The investigator or the FBI agent met us in our home and kind of went through the conversation and made us aware of what happened.
Mm. So big lesson for parents: know your child's password, because if anything harmful happens on their device,
yes,
and they're not here anymore, if you don't have that password, you cannot get in, and it could take a year or 2 years and a lot of legal processes to get into the phone. And even then you don't get access to everything. But I wonder why it even took a month to get to those Instagram messages.
I think he had deleted some of those messages, and so they had to send a subpoena to Instagram to recover some of that information. Okay. And so that was the time. Of course, in that interim, we were, back to my point of, we spent so much time together. I mean, Walker couldn't have been dealing with something over a long period of time without us recognizing it. We felt like. Yeah. But, of course, in a situation like this, there's all kinds of, snakes that crawl in your mindset that you're like, what could have happened? Was there some drug abuse? Was there something issue that we had no idea about? Was there something underlying that we could have been that blind to? There's all those questions. There was 2 emotions when we found out. One is obviously the extreme anger towards the person responsible for this, because I view it as, as simple as somebody walked in Walker's room that night and shot him. I view it as that simple. And the other side of that was that it confirmed, which we never doubted Walker and who he was and who we knew him to be. But you can't help but think through what could have caused this, and was there something we missed? But the reality was it wasn't. Walker did go to bed that night, normal and healthy and happy and with a great life. But overnight, we left the door open for somebody, a predator, to interact with our son that took his life.
Yeah. What an unbearable few weeks of time not knowing what happened. And I know there's some legislation, at least here in California, moving forward to shorten the length of time that social media companies have to respond to subpoenas in cases like these. So down to 48 hours. So, and I know that a lot of social media companies often will take months or not respond at all, or say, oh, you spelled this word wrong, and so kick it back. And anyway, I think it's really important for these companies to have some liability in responding quickly in cases like this, especially because if they can respond quickly, maybe, and provide enough information, maybe we can track down the perpetrators. And so what's the deal with the perpetrator in Walker's case? Were you able to get any information on him?
Yes. So the information we have is that he's in Nigeria. That's where it originated from. And really beyond that, the FBI continues to reassure us that they're confident we're going to, that we will eventually bring someone to justice. And that is about the extent. And even, we're in contact with them on a regular basis even today. They're still, hey, as much as we can tell you is that we're not disengaging from this, and we're confident that somebody's going to end up standing trial for what they did. Yeah. So we've got to have trust in that and faith in that. And I'll be honest, the FBI has been, at least our direct connection to the FBI has been phenomenal. That's great. She's a female agent. She's done a fantastic job, and it's really become almost a part of the family. Very compassionate, very close to, our situation, has taken a personal interest in it. And I don't think we could ask for any more than that.
Great. And this is wouldn't call it a new problem, really been exploding from what I've learned, sextortion. So what have you learned about the prevalence of sextortion since this happened to Walker? Jumping in here to tell you a little bit more about a tool that can help you protect your child from sextortion. I know that these stories can be scary, but there's hope for parents. We don't have to be in the dark thanks to monitoring technology from Bark Technologies. Bark looked deep into stories like Walker's in order to help families avoid tragedies like what happened to their family. With the Bark phone, you can manage what your child has access to, approve contacts, block certain websites, and much more. It can grow with your child, adding new features and apps as they mature, or dial it back to give them a breather. Giving your child a phone can be scary and stressful, but Bark can alleviate that stress and allow us to focus on what's important, and that's connecting with our child. Now, back to my conversation with Brian.
Yeah, so to kind of back up a little bit, sextortion, like you said, is not really new. But the origination of the scheme was really circled around whether it was a pedophile or was just perverts, wanting to exploit content for these circles that were utilizing it for personal use, right?
Yeah.
So they would try to get a female to share something, and once they did, once they had them on the hook, they were continuing to extort them for more content.
Yeah.
That's how it originated. And somewhere along the lines, and we feel like that was probably about midsummer 22 was when it really started to ramp up, which would have been when Jordan was exploited. It really started to ramp up. And what we found is, because you got to think, this Nigeria, Ivory Coast, those areas of Africa, they have become professionals at utilizing technology. It used to be sending letters, from some prince somewhere, right? They've been great over the years at developing schemes to make easy money.
Yeah.
And so how they discovered this as being a weakness and an opportunity for the criminal enterprise, I'm not sure. But around 22, they figured out that mid-year 22, they figured out that, boys, instead of this idea of trying to exploit girls, they could exploit boys at a much higher rate. The financial return, it wasn't for content necessarily, unless it was to, like I told you, to use it to exploit, another boy, was really focused on teenage boys. And they, like I said, they figured out that, they'd only have to, approach 10 boys compared to 100 girls to get one to fall for the trap. And I'm using that number. I don't know if that's reality in terms of the actual numbers, but they figured out that it was a much more efficient scheme. And the reality is that boys are risk takers, especially teenage boys that are full of testosterone, and they'll take risks, and they'll do things that females typically won't do.
Yeah.
And so they figured that out, that they were much higher rate of getting them caught in the trap. And when they did, they were just as mortified in the prospect of that information getting shared, so they would actually pay money. That's kind of the history of the scheme. And then, getting into, 22, it looks like we're still on the rise from what I understand on the occurrence of it. What I think I see, and I don't have data to back this up, but I believe that, because of the amount of awareness that we have, not us personally, but we would contribute to that. But there's a lot of families around the country that are in a similar situation as we are. The publicity around these situations has made more people aware of it, so it's not as likely for them to fall into the trap and get caught like that. So they're recognizing the scheme is what the reality is. What I've learned is that it's amazing how many instances that it was occurring, and how many times teenage boys were falling into it. I've talked to now probably at least hundreds of families, whether that was the parents or whether that was the actual kid involved. They'll find me on Facebook, they'll hear a podcast, and when they get caught in the trap, either the parents would contact me or the kids would contact me. And just know, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm not getting any help out of law enforcement. They don't really know how to advise me, and it's that situation. And so, to the extent, what was really surprising is that I would go to a church, or I'd go to a school, and I would be on a podcast, and the parents would share the podcast with the teenagers, and I would get the call, 2 weeks after they had shared the information, and the kid had fallen for the trap in that interim. We're just told that these were the scenarios that could happen.
Yeah.
But I think what we don't understand is how realistic and how deep this thing goes. It's not as easy as just saying, well, just don't fall. I mean, we're talking about a teenage boy that is I mean, sexually driven in a way that I know what I was when I was 16 years old, and I don't think these boys are any different.
Yeah.
To put that into that reality, even though they know the trap is out there and they've been warned, some kids are still falling for it. And that's the difficult thing. And I think just continue to spread awareness through podcasts, through any source of media we can.
Yeah.
And I know based on that feedback that many kids have either resisted the trap, or when they got into it, they said they recognized it once they were in it. Because I think that was that 22 period, especially like I think about Walker. Walker had no concept of this. I didn't have any concept of this.
Yeah.
And so when he got caught in that situation, he felt like he was the only person on the planet to ever have been in this situation at all, versus a kid now that has seen me on Fox News or seen me on a podcast or heard about it. He's like, oh, I recognize that. I know this could lead me. This could cost me my life.
Yeah.
And, by the time Walker realized that, it was too late.
Yeah. And these perpetrators are working from proven scripts that they're sharing within these groups, open groups on Facebook and different social media platforms. How do you feel that social media plays a part in the rising rates of sextortion?
Oh, it's huge. We'll get into the legislation aspect of it, I'm sure, in a few minutes. But, it's huge. I mean, the frustration is that tech has proven their ability to censor. Okay, so they've proven to us, whether we talk about COVID, we talk about presidential elections, you pick it. You pick the topic of, information restrictions. They've proven they've had the ability to censor and to moderate content. They continue to do that, right?
Yeah.
But they resist doing that because it has a cost to them when it comes to moderating things like this. And so that's very frustrating, because they have the ability to, I've been involved in tech enough to know the capabilities, and I know for a fact, and they know for a fact, they could have easily recognized this account from Nigeria, going to a kid in Starkville, Mississippi. Okay. Walker's 16 years old. Their platform should know that. They've got the ability to know that. Whether they will admit it or not is a different question. Yeah. They've got the ability to know that. And they also have the ability to know that this is most likely a nefarious contact. They will not restrict that. And that's forced to.
Someone who was a contractor for Instagram years ago, 2016, shared with me a report from 2016 showing within a couple of months there was hundreds of incidents involving sextortion already. They labeled it sextortion, and I searched the document for Nigeria, and Nigeria came up on that document. Yeah. So we're talking many years they've had some awareness of this, and there are so many things that social media companies can do. I mean, they know people's device ID, they know locations. A lot of these perpetrators are creating many accounts, like 2 dozen accounts to target many different kids. Right. And so if you just don't allow someone to create multiple accounts on one device, like that would help. There's so many things that would help. And so you have pushed through a bill in Mississippi. Can you tell listeners about Walker's Law?
Yeah, there's actually two bills. We'll talk about both of them, but the first one, which they passed simultaneously, but Walker's Law is a criminal law that was passed to make sextortion a crime. And that's important. It's not as important as the second piece of legislation we'll talk about, but to me. But so what it does is it defines, what are sentencing recommendations for first offense, second offense, third offense, kind of the regulations around how do we penalize somebody that has committed this crime specifically towards sextortion. So we don't have to pull from a child exploitation law or something else. But we have ways of prosecuting this particular act without that law. But I still think it's important that we define it, because when we define it, we say we're going to target this particular activity specifically and try to prevent it. So that was Walker's Law. The second piece of legislation was the Walker Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act.
Okay.
So it's an online protection bill,
Mm-hmm.
and what it does puts a responsibility on tech
Okay.
for harms
Great.
prevention. And so, there's certain types of content
Mm-hmm.
that minors shouldn't be made available to a minor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we would all agree that, I mean, what's interesting to me about that is, we were fought, I mean, and the laws are being challenged right now by Google. So, I mean, we're sitting here looking at their argument is typically a First Amendment argument that, we can't moderate this because of First Amendment rights,
Mm-hmm.
when they're consistently censoring First Amendment speech on things that they just happen to not agree with. So you can't have it both ways. I mean, you can't say that we're going to moderate based on we're not going to moderate, harmful activity targeting minors
Mm-hmm.
because of the First Amendment, but we are going to moderate and censor political speech or healthcare speech, or you pick it, wherever you want to describe it.
Yeah.
And so the bill, to back to my point, is the bill actually defines those harms and says, okay, the responsibility is back on tech to prevent these things and to make a product design that sets aside a minor and protects them from certain types of activities.
Mm-hmm. Would it disallow them to send nude imagery? Because I know that Instagram recently made an update that they can identify the nude imagery being sent in Messenger. So they'll blur it. So this is their fight back to sextortion. They'll blur it, but you can still click on it to reveal the nude image. So
Yeah, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I know.
I mean,
it's like, you guys, this is nothing. Well, I can't believe they put that out.
yeah. So, I mean, what they're saying in that, so the answer is no, it doesn't prevent a kid from, I mean, if a kid wants to search for gay activity or pornographic activity, or, I mean, they can search those things out. What it's saying is that we can't feed it to you.
Great. Yeah. Great.
Which is the algorithm, right? The algorithm can't feed it to you as a product design.
Yeah.
Yeah, back to what Instagram did. I mean, it was a response. Really, it was a response to kind of say to the general public that, hey, we're doing something. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about it, if you read through the language of that bill, they're saying that we have strong suspicion that this is a sextortion account. Mm-hmm. We're going to blur the nudity and still allow you to participate in the sextortion if you choose to.
Right.
Rather than saying this is a sextortion account, we're going to remove that account.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
No. And what about the fact that it's child sexual abuse material, that it's a minor's nude image that's being shared?
Right.
Like, shouldn't that be illegal to host on your platform?
Sure. I mean, and that's like the online harms content that we're trying to prevent. Most of those activities, drug transactions, human trafficking, all those things are against the law already. I mean, those activities are legally prohibited in our society. Mm-hmm. And they're saying we can't prohibit that on our platform, which is complete, nonsense.
Right. All because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, passed in 96, which listeners should know about by now. I bring it up a lot. So these two bills are state bills in Mississippi that you mentioned? Okay.
They are. So we've got a work group that's, and I've been a little disengaged based on some of the things that we've had going on personally in the last 6-8 months. But so we've got a work group that is, and I've been active in that and helping promote the Kids Online Safety Act. I'm not sure if your audience or you are familiar with that. Yeah. Actually, that's a federal, federal bill that does similar to what the Walker Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act does at a state level. So we have, which is insane, that we've got like 70 co-sponsors now in the Senate.
Bipartisan.
Bipartisan, absolutely. And so we still can't get it to the floor for a vote. We can't get these guys to bring it up. And we know why. It's the same reason we had the difficulties we had in Mississippi, was because of the tech lobby. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's call it what it is. I mean, we can't solve problems unless we identify the real problems.
Yeah. And they're spending millions of dollars every quarter, these tech companies, to lobby lobby against bills that will keep our kids safe and protect children from dying, which like, it's that plain and it's that wrong. When I share stories like this, not stories like Walker's, but if I share stories where a child was harmed on social media, you get a lot of parents' fault. Parents shouldn't have given them a phone. Parents' fault. What do you say to that when it comes to parent blaming?
What I don't ever want anybody to hear me say is that we don't have a responsibility as parents.
Right.
That's not my message. It's that we need help.
Yeah.
And so just to give you the culture of our home, I mean, Walker didn't even get a phone till I think he was 14.
Mm-hmm.
He got Instagram when he was 15.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that may be a year back, I can't remember. Maybe he got it when he's 13. He got Instagram when he's 14.
Mm-hmm.
We've entered a new age of how we communicate. So I want to say that you just can't just prohibit the activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's really naive in the world we live in today. If they're going to be competitive, they're going to. I mean, look, I wish I had. I mean, if you could give me a choice today, I'd said I would just not ever let a phone enter my home because I'd have my son back. But it's just not that simple. And so, what I would encourage parents to do is respond to that. You're right. I have a ton of responsibility in this, but I need help to manage it, because when we talk about technology, the system is built right now for secrecy, for hiding details, for not making parents available to the information.
Yep.
I can't manage around something I don't understand or know. And guess what? Tech wants it that way because a huge percentage of their business, a huge percentage of their business model are minors.
Yep.
And guess who the most influential people in our society is? Our kids. I mean, watch them. Send them to a neighbor's house that have a different set of cultural values than you do for a week. Get them back and see what they look, see how they act.
Yeah.
They're going. I mean, they're easily influenced at these ages, and so that's the whole. I mean, that's the whole business model around tech and social media. Do I have blame? Absolutely, I have some blame. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I have a responsibility to my family to be able to look out front and see where dangers could possibly come from. But, an example I use is, am I going to go home today and install a missile defense system on my home?
Right.
No. And why am I not going to do that? Because the likelihood of being hit by a missile is not very likely. But guess what? If I live in Israel, it's a more likely scenario, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize that a missile was going to hit my house the night of December 1st, the morning of December 1st. I didn't know it was even a possibility.
Yeah. You did the best you can with the information that you have.
Right.
And even in amplifying stories like this, talk about censoring, my content gets censored because it's considered political and social issues on Instagram. And so, some posts will reach 1 million people, but some posts will reach 2,000, and it depends on what the content is. So all we can do is just push out this message far and wide and support legislation that will hold tech companies accountable. State bills, but also the Kids Online Safety Act. And so I encourage parents to go to senate.gov and house.gov, contact your senators and your representatives in the House, ask them to put COSA for a vote, pass COSA. We need it to protect children yesterday.
To further that point is that still works. And kind of just give you a little bit of that, what our situation ended up with in Mississippi. I mean, Mississippi is, I would say, one of the top few conservative states in the country, right? And so, and not to say this is specifically a conservative issue, it's not, but I would say that conservative states have been more of a leader role in trying to do things like this generally across the country. And there's some exceptions to that for sure. California has actually been a tremendous, they've done some things that were what you could say really were kind of out of character for what the outside looking in would think that California would do. So really proud of that. But my point is that you would think that a bill like this would pass with flying colors in Mississippi, and we did too. So we kind of, there that January, February of this past year, we were in session and we were expecting, we were told kind of, we'd gotten the bills designed, written, everything, everybody was happy with them, they were going to pass, no problem, everything was going to come out. Well, we kind of re-engaged the process about 10 days left in the session. And both bills had been, one bill, that the Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act portion, had been referred to dual committees, which is the death knell for bills. We didn't know, so we pop up and we was like, what's going on? They said, well, it's just not going to pass. There's too many First Amendment questions. Well, guess what? What had happened is lobbies, the tech company lobbies had showed up in Jackson and started turning the screws. And so they got to the right people, and the bills got moved to the places where they felt like they were not going to pass. Well, as soon as we re-engaged it, because of some really helpful people in our state, some of our politicians, lawmakers that were bought in, re-engaged, and we started ringing the phones in Jackson, in our capital. And, you know, because we had built a network of families throughout the state, because, I mean, I'd spoken at that point, I don't know, you know, 100 plus churches, schools, you know, law enforcement events.
Yep.
Had done a lot of this type of work, right? So we'd built a pretty strong base for people that were in support of doing something. Well, once those phones started ringing, guess what? We had a new attitude. So I want to encourage the rest of the country, you know, from COSA. Unfortunately, it seems like we've got to lose something really important before we will engage in a solution. But I want to encourage parents, look, this is coming to your doorstep. It may not be to the same degree it came to ours, but I can promise you the harms that we're looking at, the potential avenues of harmful activity hitting our kids, is coming to your doorstep. And so you can be proactive and try to defend against it through your voice and through your vote, or you can wait till it happens to you. And I can tell you from experience, that's not the right way to go.
And we're way past not my child. You're right. Every parent I've talked to, there's kids of all different types. It's not, and every parent thought that could never happen to my child.
Right.
Also, you can restrict access. You can not give them phones, but they still have school issued devices where they can access social media, and they're going to go on their friends' devices, or they're going to go to Walmart and with 50 bucks and buy their own phone. So there's no getting away from it, and we need to require the platforms to be safe by design. So thank you for sharing your experience around that. Let's end with maybe what advice do you have for parents? So first of all, to protect your child from this happening to them if possible. And second of all, what to do if your child has been confronted with a sextortion attempt.
Yeah. So, you know, I would go back to, I wanted to add that to, you know, from the parental perspective of, you know, the parents and, you know, the reaction of some of society is going to be, well, that's your parent, the parent's fault. Brian, it's your fault. You're a parent. You didn't keep the device safe. And I would say that a percentage of that comment is correct, not 100%, but a percentage of that's right. So we had developed a culture, and I still say this, that we trusted Walker. I mean, we trusted him, and we trust our other kids. We have raised our kids in a way that they know what hard work is. They understand responsibility, very close-knit family. And so, I mean, we made the mistake of not trusting Walker. I mean, we trust Walker, and I don't regret that a bit. What I didn't have an appreciation for is the predators and just the evil that lives on the other side of that phone that is looking for an opportunity to hurt kids or hurt anybody. It doesn't matter who they are if they don't care. And so what I would encourage parents to do is start today. I mean, it's harder the older they get, but start today with a process of accountability in their home as it relates to tech. We were talking about passwords. The only reason that a kid wouldn't want their parent to have their password is because there's something there they don't want them to see. Okay. And if it's something they don't want them to see, it's probably not good for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, from an accountability and from a behavioral perspective, we were as engaged as I think we could have. I would tell you we were in a very high percentage of parents in this country and how we'd raised our kids. But we missed this, and I don't want other parents to miss it. I mean, when I say that, I mean passwords are transparent. That's not. This is my phone, not yours. Yeah. It's a privilege to have it. Passwords are transparent. We're going to collect those phones at night. At night, there's kids. You need your sleep. Number one.
Yes. Yeah.
Number one, you need your sleep, and what's happening is kids are constantly being woken up by, you know, messages and notifications and all these other things that are happening on their phones. So even if they are sleeping, they're being woke up and then going back to sleep. Woke up and going back to sleep. Bring those telephones to a common area of the home, if not in your bedrooms as parents, and have the expectation with those kids that hey, we're going to be kind of monitoring what's happening here. And it's for your protection. It's not because we're trying to micromanage. It's not because we're trying to be the you know, that you're under investigation. It's just we want the best for you, and there's some dangerous things happening. If we're going to participate in tech, this is part of the process. And like I said, the younger the kids are, the easier that is to implement.
Yeah.
The older they are, the harder it is. But as parents, we're not called to easy jobs. This is a hard job. This is a difficult job. And so take the challenge of understanding it's a difficult job, and let's protect our kids. You know, the way I see it, this is kind of how I visualize, you know, Walker's situation. I wouldn't leave an open door in Walker's room that led to the worst this planet has to offer. If you can envision a door in your kid's room that just on the other side of that door, it's unlocked, it's available, there is the worst this planet has to offer. The worst. And I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And disguised as something harmless too.
Correct.
Right? Not like they come in
Right.
looking all scary. It's like, especially on Snapchat, you look like a little angelic Bitmoji. And it's like, what do we
Yep.
expect kids to do in those situations?
That's right. And so that's what I missed, and that would be what I would tell you. That's what I really, from a regret standpoint, I think if it would have been dressed up like that scary thing you're talking about, Walker would have recognized and he'd have run from it. He'd have come got us, and we would have fixed it.
Yes.
But it's not the way it is, and so I would never leave that door open to that world. But that's when we send him to bed with that telephone. Just unadulterated, just take it and do what you want to do. All you do with anything you want to do on it. No filters, no protections. That's what we're doing. And we can church it up any way we want to, but I'm just telling you that it's there and it's available, and it will lead our kids down the road to destruction.
Brian, thank you. I also encourage parents to, if your kid's old enough, share these stories with them.
Absolutely.
Have them listen to these stories so they know what they could be faced with on their devices. Brian, thank you so much for this time and for sharing your story. And thank you for letting us get to know Walker. I'll include information on the bills that you have prepared or produced, and then also about COSA and how to support all of that. And parents, use your voices to protect kids. Brian, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.